I can see a PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Yeah,
Okay,
your
let's.
first page of PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I will close all of this. Okay, I can start. Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Global Power Platform Bootcamp, Bangalore Edition 2024. Today, I'm going to talk about how we can create bot using Copilot Studio by bringing your own data. So before I start, little bit about myself. I'm Siddharth Vagasia. I am a technical consultant, a founder at Binary Roots. So I specialize in SharePoint, Teams, App, Power Platform, and Azure development. These are some of the social handles through which you would be able to connect with me. Uh, before before we start the session, we all know, we have ChatGPT, OpenAI, which has been popular and which has been talked right now all over the world, all over the globe. One of the major concern or one of the major thoughts behind using the same technology and how secure it is, right, for an organization to use. That is where the question started arising that, yes, if we are going to put some query or prompt or response to ChatGPT or OpenAI, is it going to store our data? Is it going to process our data? Is it going to context our data? How it is going to do it, right? And that is where the organizations wanted to find the use cases or find the technology or find the way to bring their own data to the bot, right? And why do we need this, right? The main reason is, as we all know, the chat gpt model, which is 3.5, there is 4 also, only have data which is up to January 2022. It cannot bring the latest data because the models are not trained on the latest data, right? We do have some solutions around that, wherein you can use Bing Chat or Microsoft 365 Copilot or the Skype chat which we have, which is having capability to query the data against the latest information which is available on the internet, and it is able to respond based on that. But all of this is happening at the run times. It means whenever we are querying on something specific, when we are using a Bing chat, it is able to go to internet, find that information and give you the latest data, right? But if you go to chat gpt specifically, you won't be able to do it. I don't know how many of you have tried, but if you would have tried something in the chat gpt where you would have asked who is Siddharth Vagasia or who is you, right? As your person. So if you see what ChatGPT would do is it would respond saying that as per my last knowledge update as of January 2022, I don't have specific information about individual Siddharth Vakasia. It might be a prominent, celebrity, or it might be widely known in the public domain, but which is well known after January 2022, I might not be able to know that, right? So it is not able to give that response because it doesn't have the latest data information in there. Same way, consider a use case wherein what if you wanted to use the capability of ChatGPT or an OpenAI, but you wanted to do it based on your data. It means within your data, within your organization, within your use cases which you wanted to build, within your application data which you have, you wanted to build and do something like that. That is what this session is about. So in a way, you would have already known that there are so many versions of Copilot, which is there from the Microsoft 365, right? All of these Copilot are specific to the products. It means there is a Copilot for Power Apps, there is a Copilot for Power Automate, there is a Copilot for PPT, Copilot for Word. Every of the Copilot integration which is there about the Word applications or about the integration which is there is specific to that application. Now, what if we wanted to have our own Copilot, okay, custom Copilot, which would be able to respond on the specific data set which you have. And that is where the Copilot Studio comes into picture. Now, before I talk about, before we talk about the actual use cases, we have to understand what is Copilot Studio and how it is different than what it was already there. First thing we have to understand is that Copilot Studio is nothing but a rebranding of Power Virtual Agent by adding some capabilities around Power Virtual Agent. So if you are already have used or known Power Virtual Agent, it is exactly the same, but now it has been renamed as Copilot Studio, but it has some generative AI capability which is added. So we as in application developer who are specifically solving the business use cases, who are not that AI engineer, right? Who doesn't have to deep dive into the AI algorithm, the ML algorithm and everything, but still wanted to fulfill some use case or create some app or a bot around that, we would be able to do that using Copilot Studio. Okay. So again, to summarize, Power Virtual Agent is Copilot Studio. No difference there. Only thing is there are some capabilities which has been added, which we're going to talk about, which will allow us to respond, or the bot should be able to respond to based on the sources which you have. Okay, based on the sources which you have configured. We will see what kind of sources would be there. Officially, if you see what is Copilot Studio, basically it's a low code tool. So as Power Virtual Agent was also a low code tool, wherein you would be able to quickly create bots around topics and around system prompts, sorry, not system problem, around topics which will be there. Based on that topic, a particular workflow get initiated based on the intent of the user, or based on the query string. We would be able to configure that, and then we would be able to respond to that, right? So a new capability has been added. So this Copilot Studio, through which we would be able to create our own custom Copilot, which can enable the enterprise scenario. It means you would be able to respond based on the data which you have. It can be a structured data, it can be an unstructured data, and through which we would be able to quickly build and test the standalone Copilots and custom GPTs, right? Now, good thing about the Copilot Studio is that it is going to allow us the customization, okay, with the right access data and user control analytics. It means we still have all the capability of Power Virtual Agent which was already there, plus depending on what access the user has, if we are doing an integration with SharePoint or OneDrive, depending on what access the user has, the bot would be only able to respond to that particular info. So we don't have to take care of the security also in that case. Okay. Now, I would, if you have not already tried, okay, what you can do is you can go to this URL, which is aks.ms, try PVA. There is 1 month trial which would be enabled for you. You can extend it till 3 months, so it would be, you would be able to extend the same trial for the 3 months, and you would be able to create your own Copilot Studio bot and try the capability which is there. I would encourage, if you are a Power Platform enthusiast, you are already working on it, or if you wanted to just try it, just go here and try. It is very easy to develop. Also, it is very easy to configure the way we wanted to configure it, and then you would be able to find some good ideas or good use cases around it to build for your organization, right? So now let's talk about generative answers, right? I want to take a pause, and if someone can understand what is generative AI, just if somebody can just quickly summarize or tell us what is generative AI. Anybody can please unmute. Let's make it a bit interactive so that we understand the concept which we are learning is same, and is related to ChatGPT also. Anybody can tell what is like generative AI? Okay. Okay, no worries. What I will do is you can put it in the chat also. I'm also seeing the chat. If you have any queries or anything, you can feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll discuss from there. So basically, see, generative AI is a form of a new AI through which the artificial intelligence or the algorithms are able to generate some content based on the existing large LLM models which are there, right? So if you have already used ChatGPT or OpenAI, or if you have already tried that, what it is going to do is, if you tell us that, okay, create me a story about, a father and a child, or between a mother and a child, and if you would see that it is able to create a story based on the context which you have given, based on the instruction which you have given. If you tell it, make it short, it will make it short. If you tell it make it long, it will make it long. If you tell OpenAI or ChatGPT, like, write an article on a particular topic, it would be able to create that. That means it is generating the information, right, based on the actual information which is there. So that is why it is called generative AI. So it means it has the data or the LLM been trained on something, and based on the prompt or the query which we are giving, it is able to create new information out of it, right? And that is why it is called generative AI. Now, to understand generative AI in Copilot Studio, we have to understand, generative answers, basically, which is what the Copilot Studio is using. It is using the same capability of generative AI, and it is able to generate the answers from the multiple sources. The sources can be internal, external, without we able to create the topics. Now, the people who would have already created an PVA would understand that topic is nothing but a particular set of use case or a flow which we write based on the text which the user is going to send, right? So if user is, for example, if it is a topic about getting a weather, and you can put some intent saying that, okay, user might say get weather, or it might say, what does the weather look like today, or it might say something else which is related to weather. So you create a topic out of it. You create a simple flow, or an topics in a way which is more or less flow only. And then once the query is been passed, the topic would be triggered based on that particular intent of the user, and then we can make our own actions which we would be creating. Like, for example, you can call and weather API to get the API to get the API information, weather information, and then respond it back. Right now, where does the generative answer comes into picture? Now, consider if you are using the creating a PVA, right? Now, for example, let me go to a particular Copilot Studio PVA, and if you go, you would see there are some topics which are there, right? And then there are system topic also. So every topic would have a trigger point, and then it would have its own description. Like, for example, to start with it, the conversation start topic, which is a system topic, which by default has been created. Uh, on the conversation start, what it is going to do is, whenever the user would going to say hi, hello, or something like that, it is just going to respond based on like hello display name, which is the user's name, right? Same way, if we go to another topic, like, for example, end of the conversation, end of the conversation, what it will say is, it will just say, have we answered your question? If it is says yes, then it will basically go and ask for the feedback, right? So this is a particular topic. Now consider you are dividing your whole use cases into different topics, and then on the logic, actual logic is been drilled down into that particular topic, so that whenever the user has triggered that particular topic based on the trigger point which is there, the whole flow get executed and you would be able to respond it back. In a way, it is more or less very much similar to Power Automate. So what you are saying is, there are some conditions which you can write, then there is an action which is sending message. So as soon as you use this kind of action, it is going to send the message back to the user. So that is what the topic is about. Now to understand that in terms of generative answer or the generative node, the good thing about is that if there are some unknown intents, right? If there are some fallback scenarios, it means that though we have created 10 or 15 topics, but out of the 10 15 topics, the user has asked something which is not been configured as a topic. Okay, there is no trigger point with that topic. It means that it is going to go into a fallback scenario. In a typical cases before this, the fallback scenario can be wherein if the bot is not able to respond to particular answer, then it we can escalated to a particular live agent, right? It means you would be able to write a logic where you are connecting the end user to an agent. It means a support person who would be then able to respond back, and so that he would be able to do it. I mean, this scenario is very common across every bot which is there. It will have its own knowledge database. If it is not able to find any information from the knowledge database, if user is asking something else, then it goes to the fallback scenario and connects to the live agent, right? Now consider here that in your organization you wanted to build a simple bot, okay, which is very much specific to answering the HR policies, okay, of your organization, right? Now your HR policies can be in a Word document, it can be in a PDF document, it can be in PPT, or it can be in the SharePoint page somewhere. It means there has been HR policies been created by your HR team, kept it somewhere and used as a knowledge base, right? Now consider you just wanted to create an HR simple mini bot wherein the bot should only be able to respond to queries related to HR. If it is found, then give back the response. If not found, it can say, I didn't found the information, right? That is where this Copilot Studio comes into picture, wherein you would be able to create small bots, or you would be able to create a larger bot also, but then you would be able to respond the bot the bot would be able to respond based on the sources which is given. The sources can be internal or external, as I said. Let me go to next slide to understand what are the different data sources which you can configure as part of your Copilot Studio, right? There, it can be categorized into two things: external source and internal source. External source wherein you can configure it based on a Bing web search. Okay, it doesn't require any external configuration or anything. By default, if you are enabling the Bing web search, it means the Copilot which you are building or the standalone Copilot you are creating will have the same capability of the Bing web search which is there. It means it would be able to go and find the latest information which is available on the internet and would be able to respond it back in generated answer manner. It means if it is you are talking about, asking to do something like, how do you want to connect two routers for certain to extend your Wi-Fi signals, right? Then if that information is already available somewhere in the internet, which might be after Jan 2022 also, then also it would be able to query it and respond it back, because that is how it is able to do use the capability of the Bing search and then summarize that response based on the article or the page which has been found. Same way you can do Bing custom search, which is again old one. It's not a new one, but Bing custom search is where we were able to connect our custom data to Bing, and the Bing would be able to respond and search on their internal data which was there. So that also can be used here. Coming to the internal sources, you would be able to configure SharePoint, you would be able to configure OneDrive for business, you would be able to custom upload your documents which would be uploaded to Dataverse. So it means that if you have just small set of documents you don't want it to upload into SharePoint, or don't want to do configuration of enabling it for the SharePoint, then you can just have that set of documents which you can manually upload it. It goes to Dataverse, but the bot would be able to respond and find that information from that documents and would be able to respond it back. Same way, custom data, if you don't have, like it can be internal or external, basically supplying our own source, right? It means that custom data means it needs a specific JSON object in which you should be sending the response back. We will see that. I have a sample for that. But basically, before creating that custom JSON object in the format which Copilot Studio requires, you can query your own data. It can be anywhere. It can be in SQL, MySQL. It can be an API, or it can be anything. Once you have your custom data, you just have to reparse it, or you just have to parse it in the format which Copilot Studio understand, and the bot would be able to respond to that. We will see that in detail. Now, this is just a table which is from Microsoft documentation, which says, the different data source which is there, whether it is an internal or an external source, what is the description, and number of inputs which you can provide. Okay. One thing is when we are talking about, the Bing search or the external public URLs which we are talking about, it is able to only at one Copilot bot which you are going to create as with the Copilot Studio would only support 4 public URLs. It means you would be only able to give 4 public URLs. Okay, it cannot be more than that. For now, that is the limitation. Authentication mode, none. We will talk about authentication mode and why it is important to understand that it needs to be done when you are doing a bot or creating a bot based on the data source which you have in your SharePoint or OneDrive. It is very much important to understand that authentication should be there. Then Bing custom search, you can, if you already have your own Azure OpenAI based service which you have created, where you have your custom vector database or vector embeddings, and which is basically a pro code, Azure AI solution to create your own bot with using the same capability of OpenAI. That also can be configured. It means you just have to select the configuration or service connection which is already there in the Azure, and the bot would be able to respond to that. And then we are talking about documents which you are uploading manually, as I talked about. Then if you have to understand that the authentication part for that is none, right? It means because the document is already there, and it has been uploaded, it means if I am asking some information, and if Bhargav is asking some information, it is able to respond same, because it is the authentication is none. But when it comes to SharePoint and OneDrive, we would be able to configure in such a way that if Bhargav doesn't have access to a particular SharePoint document library, and if I have access and if I'm asking something, it would be able to find and retrieve the information from the document library. But for Bhargav, it won't, because he doesn't have access to that SharePoint. So that is the good thing, is internally manages that delegated permission, or the by default the responses are security trimmed. So based on the logged in user and his access and his permission, it would be able to respond it back. So this is the table about that. Now, we just have to understand this generative answer node. Okay, the first slide where we understood the concept of generative AI and the generative answer. Now, generative answer node is nothing but a node or an action within the Power Virtual Agent, which is newly introduced as a part of Copilot Studio, through which we would be able to generate this scenario-based input which we are talking about. Okay, we will see that in detail. Now, talking about authentication, right? I was talking why it is important. So, if there is something which is in the public domain, which is already anonymous access enabled, doesn't require authentication, right? But if your data is in your SharePoint OneDrive, then it needs authentication. It means we should be authenticating the user so that the user who is or the end users who are accessing the bot doesn't need to basically share the extra information which is not there, right? If isn't user doesn't have access, and if we are creating a bot by SharePoint, he doesn't have access. But if you are asking via bot, if he is able to respond, then that would be a security breach. Okay, so you don't need to do that. So you have to have your bot which should be authentication enabled, and it should only be able to respond to the data which you have access, and that is why the authentication is important. One thing to understand is that it basically calls uses the credentials from the Power Virtual Agent Microsoft.com. It means once the user has logged in, uh, using that logged in user's information for the end user, it would be able to respond back, and based on that credentials or based on that token, it would be able to do it. Now, talking about the supported contents, right? By default, the supported contents are SharePoint pages. It means if you are configuring a SharePoint site, the any SharePoint pages which are created, your HR policy documents or your knowledge base can be not just document, it can be a SharePoint page also, right? It would be able to respond back that also, because in a way, if you think about it, if it is able to query a page which is there in the public domain, it should be also able to query a page which is there in the SharePoint. So that is supported content. Word document is there, PPT is there, and PDF is there. There is a markdown readme language also, or TXT file also, which I have probably missed mentioning it here, but it should be able to respond to the text document also, or the MD file also, right? Now, before we go into the demo and everything, okay, one of the important step, if you are trying and doing it in your trial environment, uh, if you are doing it in your organization, and if you are not a Power Platform admin center, you might have to connect with your Power Platform admin to enable one particular setting, right? Without that, that won't be the generative AI feature won't work. What you have to do is you have to go to Power Platform Admin Center, select the targeted environment in which you wanted to create your Copilot Studio bot, and then within that you would see this kind of generative AI features where it has an option which says move data across region. You have to allow it, and you have to say that, okay, I'm giving the consent that the data movement can be done across the region. Okay, now we have to understand why this is required, and if you are going to go and ask to your Power Platform admin, they might come up with the question like, why do you need it, right? So first thing is because we if we are based in India, the region which we would be an Asia specific region which would be there, right? But the generative AI capability or the features which is there, which is still not the data centers or the processing unit are still not there in the Asia specific region, but it is just might be in the US somewhere, right? So it needs that data to be passed from our region to that region. Okay, so if your organization doesn't have this kind of policies in place, then only you should enable it. Otherwise, you should have a proper way of getting the consent from your Power Platform admin center or your team. But if you're trying it on your own on your demo tenant, you should just enable it. But otherwise, just make sure that before you ask, you understand the implication of where the data is going to be moved across the regions. It means that it is not going to stay in your region or in your tenant. It might, I mean, it can still be in your tenant also, but it will be in a way move across the different region which is there. So now, okay, so that's it from the PPT slide. Let's go for the demo. Before I go for the demo, what I wanted to kind of show you is this is the Copilot URL which is there, from where you would be able to go. Previously it was PVA, now it has been changed to copilotstudio.microsoft.com. Okay, in here in the dashboard, what you are going to see is you are going to see all the Copilot which you have created. Okay, from here you would be able to go and create and say new Copilot. Okay, what you have to do is you have to just give the name, which language the Copilot Studio is going to use, and if you wanted to enable a public facing website, you can just put it here so that by default the generative AI answers would be there. Okay, in the advanced option, you can choose if you want to move that particular Copilot into a different solution, or different solution altogether, or if you want to put the schema name changes, etc., that you can do, and you can choose the icon and everything. Once you do that, it takes probably 3-4 minutes, so I'm not going to go there, but this is the first step which you have to do, right? Also, let me go to one more thing. Let me go to the Power Platform Admin Center, where we are talking about that data region thing. So if you go to environment, you have to choose a particular environment. So if I'm going to go to my default environment, in here you would see generative AI features, right? In here you can click it, and then you would be able to see. I'm not sure why that option is still not coming right now. They might have done some changes. Okay, or by default I have already enabled, that is why it is saying that. Okay, but this is where you have to enable your generative AI features. Okay, now once you create your Copilot bot studio, what you is going to do is it is going to create a bot which would be very much similar to what you are seeing right now. Right now, if you see, this bot should be able to respond to certain data which is not available in the public domain, right? So we have seen, like it we when we are putting it in, like who was Siddharth Vagasia, it was not able to respond, right? The chat GPT was not able to respond. So in this case, what I have done is I have created my own data source, or which is a SharePoint document library, wherein what we are going to do is it is able to go and respond back, saying that Siddharth Vagasia is a technical consultant, founder of Binary Roots, and it is also going to give you the reference. Okay, and if I click on that reference, it is by default it is downloading, but in a way this document has been uploaded somewhere, and we will see what kind of document we have now. So this is the kind of power of Copilot Studio, wherein it is able to respond based on the information which we have created. Right now, next thing, well, let's see where is my data source, right? So this is a SharePoint site. Okay, within this SharePoint site, I have a document library, which is a default document library, and within there, I have uploaded some sample documents. So what you are seeing is you are seeing some of the resumes here, you are seeing Pune Tech Community introduction slide, and then you are seeing an intro slide document from me, and then my resume and some timesheet policies or time this kind of document also, right? Now, if I'm going to ask anything else, right? Like what is timesheet policy? So what it will do is it will see, and it will, if it found some information in the data source which we have given, then it would be able to respond and summarize that. Okay. Now, good thing about this one is, you are not just getting the reference where it found that particular document, right? You are actually getting a summarized generated content out of it, so that if you don't have to drill down into it, at least you would be able to know, what your query is able to do. Same way, if you see here, this it says, a set of guidelines governed by so and so, and then it is giving the reference to that particular PDF document. Okay, so that is how you would be able to create, and bring your own data into the custom source. I'm going to try some queries. Okay, like for example, let me say I consider, in my use case, because I have so many resumes uploaded, right? What if I wanted to check, consider in your internal organization you have resumes or you have skill set defined somewhere, and you wanted to find who has worked on a particular project, or somebody from the HR have wanted to find. So if I will ask, who has worked on citizen management canvas app, what it will do is it will able to find that information. It would be able to respond back, and it says, the canvas was worked by Akash Maurya, and this is the PDF document through which it was able to find that. So it means in the resume of Akash, there is an project section wherein he has mentioned that he has worked on the canvas management app, and that is why it is able to respond back, right? Now, let's try one more thing. Now, we were also talking about, so we talked about the information which is configured internally within SharePoint, right? We also talked about the information which is there in the public facing website. In this case, what I did is uh, I have enabled a only just one public facing website, which is Kun's website. Okay, and if we go here, it is saying that Kunj is a consultant with this experience. He is happily married and proud dad of baby boy. If you go here, it is taking you to his website where it is his information. It was able to grab it from, right? And we will see, but this was been configured as a public facing website in one of the data sources, and that is why it is able to respond it back, right? Now, okay, let's see one more example. If this sometimes doesn't respond, but let's see. I'm just asking how to run PowerShell in Mac, right? Now think about it. What I did was once I configured Schoon's website, it was not just able to index one page, but it was able to index everything. So as I anticipated, it didn't found that particular information from the Schoon's website. Okay, but there are certain articles which are there, right? Now, if I'm going to ask something related to one of the article which is already there, let me try. Uh, like how to extend graph using custom plugin, right? And let's see if it is able to respond. Okay, this still feature is still in the preview. I have seen good result which is coming along, but sometimes it might not be able to respond, and we have to see, what that particular document or what the data source is not able to do it. So in this case, if you see, what it says is to extend a graph developer proxy using custom plugin, you need to follow this step. So it has summarized the step, and then it has given you the external source, which is the article from the Kunz website, right? So this is how. So we have seen an example of SharePoint, right? We have seen example of a public website which is there, and then let us see an example of the custom data source. Okay, and once we will see the demo, I'm going to show you how this data source were configured so that you understand that, okay, this is where this information was coming from, and you would be able to relate that. So I'm just saying how many samples from the Nick Brown. Consider this is my custom data or the custom JSON object which I was retrieving. I'm sorry, but I couldn't find any number of samples taken from in the retrieve documents. Okay. It is actually able to find it, but the generative answer is not able to say because it has the sample references which was there in my custom data, but it is the generative answer is not saying. Let me try again. So, but this information is coming from the uh, this information coming from the custom data object. Okay, it means the custom JSON which I have provided, and then this custom JSON object, you can, as I said, you can query your own custom data. You can create a Power Automate flow. You can directly call an HTTP calls, get the JSON object and convert into the format which is needed, and then you that can be used as a data source path. So this becomes a real-time integration, right? Consider the possibility wherein when the user is asking if it is not able to find anywhere within the SharePoint, we can write a condition that if it is not found anywhere else, go and found it here. Okay, or you can actually create an intent based topic. It means if you're saying that, okay, for example, considering you are creating a bot for your sales team, right, wherein your sales data is in somewhere in SQL table or somewhere which is exposed via API, and if it is saying that, okay, show me the sales from last 5 days. Okay, so what you have to do is basically in a way you can make an API call to find the data from last 5 sales. So you know that, okay, the query is, from last 5 days sales, right? It means you have to query that data. Once the API brings back the data, you have to convert that into a particular JSON object that, okay, this is the sales data from last 5 days, and the bot would be able to respond to that, right? So now we have seen demo of the use cases which we are talking about. Now let's see how this has been built and how this works. Okay, so for you to understand, as we already talked about, so there would be topics, and there would be topics which would be the custom topics, and there would be system topics. System topics are the topics which would be default created, by default created for a particular use case. So if you have enabled some sample data, by default this much system topics would be created. Okay, now it would be like on conversation start, end of the conversation, on escalate, fallback, if it found multiple topics, on error, and everything, right? What you wanted to do when this kind of trigger point happens. Okay. We are not going to focus on anything else, but if you are going to try on your own, I just wanted to make sure that we are going to use the fallback mechanism as I was saying, right? So what you should ideally do is by default, whenever you create a Copilot Studio bot, by default, it will enable a system topic which would be fallback. In here, what it is going to do is it is actually going to try 3 times. Okay. And if not, then it is going to escalate and find a real agent to do that. Okay. But in our case, because we don't want this use case to be run whenever there is an unknown intent which we didn't found, what we will do is we will disable this. Okay. So just make sure that you are disabling this particular fallback, which you don't need. And You can, once you will go and enable your conversation boosting, what it will do is it will create this conversation boosting, and the trigger point would be on unknown intent. Okay, so this is where all the magic is going to happen. Now when we are saying an on unknown intent, it means when there is no topic match found, it is going to come here. Okay, so if you would have seen, whenever I'm asking some query, uh, it is actually coming here always. Okay, we will see, I will try one more query later. But in here what I am doing is there is a node which is saying create generative answers. Okay, how do you add that? You, if you suppose you are doing it from the scratch, you go to, you click on add button, you go to advanced mode, and you can say generative answers. Okay, and in here it will add that node. Okay, and then now what you have to do is you have to edit your data sources. Now in edit your data sources, as we are talking about, first one of the data source would be the public facing website. So in here you can put a public facing website which is available. In here you can put SharePoint sites which you can add. In here you can configure your Azure OpenAI service data. So if you see here, it is going to just use the connections properties only. Okay, so it means if the connection is already created, you just have to configure it. And then there is custom data. So a single generative answer should be able to query more than 3 to 4 data sources, right? Now I will delete this. I don't want to. So what we will do is we will use the existing one which I have used to understand how the data source has been configured. So if you come here, if you come to the data source, in here what I did is I have put the Kunz public facing website, right, which is available, and that is why it is able to respond to some of the queries when I'm asking who is Kunj Sangani. And if you have seen here, there is no resume of Kunj or no information about Kunj in our SharePoint site, but it is available in the public facing website. Then I have configured this SharePoint URL, which is the community URL, which we were seeing, wherein it is there, right? So you are, please understand that we are not going to configure a particular document library or a particular SharePoint page. What you would have to configure is whole SharePoint site itself. Okay, you cannot right now configure at the library level or anything. So if you are building a bot and if you consider that your data is somewhere else, just make sure that it would be able to respond to all the content which is there across all the libraries within your SharePoint site, across all the pages also, right? So this is where the SharePoint configuration is there. This is where the public facing configuration is there. Now, one thing is custom data, which we are
Just,
talking about.
just a quick time check, another 5 minutes.
Yes, yes, I'm almost done. Yeah. So now we are talking about the custom data, right? So this is what the custom data node brings. So what I'm doing is, for now I have just hard coded the custom JSON object which I needed. What it had is it had content location. Then let me copy it and put it somewhere nice. If I, yeah, I already have it here. So I have a content location which says the reference URL. Then you have the content. Okay, and the content can be anything which you want. So this is where I was talking about, you parse your JSON object, you create a JSON object where you have two attribute, content location and content. In fact, there is one more attribute which is recently added, which is title, which you can also use, and it will show the title of that particular content also. And from here it would be able to respond. And that is where, if you see, I was asking how many samples from Nick Brown. It is saying that okay, there is one sample from the Nick Brown and this is the sample. And in this case, because it is a custom JSON object, that is why we need this content location. So it specifies where the location is. So if you have your custom data, you need to make sure that you understand where do you want the user to redirect to, right? Whenever the user would be click on the reference document. Okay, so this is how the custom data and everything would work, right? So in a way, what you have to do is you have to use the custom action, generative answer, configure your data source, and that's it, right? But we also talked about the authentication. So I'll just take last, couple of minutes to understand where the authentication has to be configured when you wanted to do SharePoint integration, because that is important. So in that particular Copilot, if you go to settings, you will have security, right? I'm saying yes, leave. In the security, you will have authentication. So go to authentication, and this is where you would be able to configure your authentication for this particular bot. Okay. Now we have to understand what are the three options. Okay. No authentication, it means that the user won't be authenticated. It would be able to respond, but it won't be able to respond based on the public information which is there. Okay. It won't be able to respond on the SharePoint data. Now only for Teams and Power Apps, this can be used if you want to create a bot specifically for Teams and Power Apps. But if you wanted to expose your Copilot bot outside of Teams and Power Apps, then you always need to use the third option, which is the manual for the custom website. Okay. Now, once you enable this, what you will get is you have to put this client ID, client secret, and everything. Okay. Now, this concept is same, and as we have to understand that anytime a client, in this case, a Copilot Studio is a client. Whenever it has to access the data, which is either graph data or SharePoint REST API data, we need to create an Azure app registration, and that is what information this is about. Okay, so I have an Azure ID app registration with this particular client ID, which is there in my portal.azure, which I have created, and from there we are also giving the permission that it should be sites.read.all and files.read.all. Okay, why it need that is because whenever the Copilot Studio is going to go and try to find information from the SharePoint, though being a delegated permission, it needs to give that permission, right? So and that is where if I come here and if I go to my intra ID in the app registration, oh sorry, I am in a different directory. I have to go to this one. Yeah. So this step is very important because if you don't do this, you won't be able to configure or enable your SharePoint integration or your OneDrive integration, right? So if I will post this here, I will say view in all directories. Okay, so this is where I created the app registration. From here, you have to create your client secret the way we generally do it. And in the API permission, you need to make sure that you are adding sites.read.all and files.read.all. This is where it says it is a delegate, and that is why it is only able to respond to the document on which we have access. Otherwise, it won't be able to respond back. And the other URLs which you are seeing, this is always same. You will find this URL in the Learn Microsoft documentation. You don't have to select anything else. In the service provider, you have to select Azure Active Directory version 2, put the client ID, client secret, and all of this, and that's it. This bot would be able to respond to the data sources which we have configured. And that's it from my side. I think I'm right on the time. I would still be here if there is any questions from the chat window or if you wanted to unmute yourself. Otherwise, I would like to thanks again the organizer, Bhargav, Jenkins, Kamlesh, and everyone for giving me an opportunity to present it here. Thanks everyone, and hope you had a good time today.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Unfortunately, we're just over 5 minutes, so we want to ensure that the next session gets in.